Topic of the study is primary school English teachers' conception and practices of classroom assessment. In the past years, assessment has been done using paper and pencil tests, which is called as traditional examination. But this traditional examination method has become less appropriate for the current age. So classroom assessment has been introduced in many countries, which has four main expectations. First, to overcome weaknesses by the earlier assessment system, which is the traditional examination method. Two, to improve teaching and learning. Three, to improve students' motivation. And fourth, to give positive impact in students' inner emotional strength. Classroom assessment was firstly introduced in Malaysia in the year 2011, which was in the beginning called as school assessment. But from the year 2018, school assessment began to be known as classroom assessment. It has two main aims. First, to see the development of students' progress in learning, and second, helping teachers to improve their teaching and learning. So the problem statement. Several studies shows that teachers' classroom assessment practices are still not at satisfying level, which by teachers are still using a whole lesson like an examination in order to determine students' performance level, and they do not collaborate classroom assessment during their teaching and learning. Secondly, teachers also faces challenge in creating multi-form assessment tools. There are also several research done under option and non-option teachers assessment practices. But the outcome of studies shows a different in certain subject. For certain subject like Arabic language and arts, it shows significant. But for certain subject like physical education, the study shows no significant result. When come to practices and conception of assessment by primary school English teachers. Primary school English teachers usually place heavy emphasis on traditional assessment, and they also face challenges in managing sources like behavior-oriented, ability-oriented, and skill-oriented. There are also studies prove that classroom assessment done by the teachers is not in line with the guideline given in the standard-based English language curriculum. When come to conception of assessment, several studies shows that misconception of classroom assessment create issues like in the aspect of validity, reliability, practicality, administration, monitoring, and equivalence, which shows that teachers don't truly understand the conception of classroom assessment. Instrument used for this study, there are two. First, primary school English teachers' conception of classroom assessment, and primary school English teachers' practices of classroom assessment. These two instruments were developed by Yusni Rahman in the year 2014 based on Brown's conception of assessment. Both these instruments will be adapted in order to make it appropriate for the attributes of primary school English teachers' conception and practices of classroom assessment. Hence, the research objective of the study, there are four. First, to determine the psychometric properties of the adapted instruments. Second, to find if there is a significant correlation between primary school English teachers' conception and practices of classroom assessment. Third, to determine if there's a significant mean difference between primary school English option teachers and non-option teachers in the conception of classroom assessment. Fourth, to determine if there's a significant mean difference in the primary school option teachers, English option teachers, and primary school non-English option teachers in practices of classroom assessment. So based on the research objective, the research questions will be number one, to what is the level of psychometric properties of the adapted instruments. And number 2, to find if there's a significant correlation between primary school English teachers' conception and practices of classroom assessment. 3, to find is there any significant mean difference between primary school English option teachers and non-option teachers in conception of classroom assessment. And 4th, is there any significant mean difference between primary school English option teachers and non-English option teachers in practices of classroom assessment? There are 3 alternative hypotheses in these studies. First, there is a significant correlation between primary school English teachers' conception of classroom assessment and practices of classroom assessment. 2, there is a significant difference in the mean score between primary school English option teachers and non-English option teachers in conception of classroom assessment. 3, there is a significant difference in the mean score between primary school English option teachers and primary school non-English option teachers in practices of classroom assessment. Item response theory is applied in this study to analyze the psychometric properties of the instruments adapted. Okay, it focus on item response theory focus on estimation of the latent trait that theoretically underlies the observed response to a test item. This is the item characteristic curve, which represents the relationship between ability and item response. A theory applied in this study is theory of planned behavior, which was proposed by Isaac Aigen in the year 1985. It's a psychological theory that links belief into behavior. It has a general rule that the stronger a person's behavior to engage in something, the more the person's belief to accept it, resulted in the more interest to implement it practically. When applied to this study, the belief will be the teacher's conception of assessment, and this has a link into behavior, which is teachers' practices of classroom assessment. Based on the theory, this is the theoretical framework, primary school English teachers' conception of assessment towards primary school English teachers' practices of classroom assessment. There are 4 constructs under conception of assessment and 9 constructs under practices of classroom assessment. Skill and knowledge are 2 main aspects comes under practices of classroom assessment. Methodology, research design, there are 2 main research design. Firstly, in order to determine the psychometric properties of the adapted instrument. Secondly, this research will use a quantitative approach. A survey will be done to identify English option teachers and non-English option teachers relation mean score under conception of classroom assessment and practices of classroom assessment. Besides that, a correlation research design will apply to identify the correlation between conception of classroom assessment and practices of classroom assessment. Hence, the independent variables will be teachers, primary school English option teachers and primary school non-English option teachers, whereas the dependent variable will be conception of classroom assessment and practices of classroom assessment. A sample will be from Krian District, Perak. This district is chosen because this district has the most non-English option teachers in order to get a heterogenic group. English option teacher and non-English option teachers. 200 respondents from 20 grade A government primary school. So from this 200, there will be 100 English option and 100 non-English option teachers. A stratified random sampling will be used. For the first instrument, primary school English teachers' conception of classroom assessment has 5-point Likert rating scale, and this has 4 main construct. The construct formative has 4 items, construct diagnosis has 4 items, evaluation has 5, and negative has 5 items. The instrument primary school English teachers' practices of classroom assessment will be used 4-point Likert rating scale. It has 9 constructs. Construct feedback has 9 items. Accountability 5, measurement 3, testing 4, improvement 5, using assessment outcome 10, reporting assessment outcome 5, assessment method 3, administrating assessment has 4 items. This is the process of adaptation of instrument applied in this study. First, selection of the instrument, followed by literature review, and then modification on some items according to classroom assessment of English subject. Goes to initial translation from Malay version to English version, followed by synthesis of translation, back-to-back translation, and finally sent to a committee of experts in order to find content validity of the instrument. There are 6 steps involved to identify the content validation. First, preparing content validation form. Secondly, selecting a review panel of experts. Third, conducting content validation. Fourth, reviewing domain and items. 5, providing score on each item. And finally, calculating CVI in order to make decision like to accept the item or to make some changes or to drop the items. The data collection will be done using hard copy and Google Form depend on the school's preferences. Firstly, school administrator will be contacted and then to head of English Panitia. The briefing will be given to head of English Panitia, and finally the questionnaire will be passed to the respondents. There are 2 types of data analysis mainly conducted in this research. Firstly, in order to find the psychometric properties of the instrument, a RASH analysis model, a RASH measurement model will be applied using a software called WingStep. There will be 2 properties analyzed in this study. First, construct validity will be done using model data fit, unidimensionality, differential item functioning, and right map. Secondly, reliability of the instrument will be figured out using item reliability, item separation, person reliability, and person separation. The second part of the data analysis will be done using inferential statistics using IBM SPSS version 26. To answer the second research question, a correlation coefficient method will be used to identify the correlation between primary school English teachers' conception and practices classroom assessment. And secondly, to find the mean difference between primary school English option teachers and non-English option teachers in conception of classroom assessment and practices of classroom assessment. This will be done using independent sample t-test. And that's all for this study. Thank you.